Okay, hi, welcome back to this live stream for Windows Server 2003. So I just want to share my screen. Okay, assigning and unsigning policies. Whether you're defining policies that affect one computer or a multinational enterprise network, you assign and unassign IPsec policies the same way by right-clicking the policy in question and using the assign and unassign commands. When a policy is assigned, it takes effect the next time IPsec policies are refreshed. You may remember that the IPsec policy agent downloads and the policy information for a computer when the computer is restarted. If you're using group policy to distribute your IPsec settings, you can force a policy update using the group policy snap-in. Other policy management features. If you know how to create new policies, assign them, and set their properties, you already know almost everything you need to know to manage IPsec, though we haven't covered the mechanics of changing policy settings just yet. There are a few additional features that you may find useful in your IPsec implementation. Forcing a policy update. If you want to force one machine to update its IPsec policy, just stop and restart the IPsec policy agent service on that machine. When the service starts, it attempts to retrieve the newest available policy from Active Directory or the local policy. Once the policy has been loaded, it's immediately applied. Restarting the policy agent forces it to update and reapply the correct policy. This can be useful when you're trying to troubleshoot a policy problem or when you want to be sure that the desired policy has been applied. By default, the IPsec policy agent will update policies every 180 minutes, although you can change that setting. Alternatively, you can use the GP update /target computer /force command to refresh the local computer's policy settings. Policy management with the pop-up menus. Using the context menu, which comes up when you right-click a policy, you can rename, delete, or import and export policies. The command to import and export policies might seem unnecessary, but they occasionally come in handy if you're not using Active Directory. For example, let's say you have a small network of computers using Windows 2000 Professional and XP Professional. You can create local IPsec policies on one machine and then export them from the source computer and import them to the remaining machines. Doing so ensures a consistent set of IPsec policies without requiring that you have an Active Directory domain controller present. Configuring IPsec policies. Once you create a new policy using the IP security policy wizard, you still have to customize it. You do this with the policy properties dialog box, from which you can add, remove, and manage rules, filter, lists, and security actions. There are two separate tabs in the properties dialog box. The general tab covers general policy related settings like the policy name, and the Rule tab gives you a way to edit the rules associated with the policy. You will also see how to configure settings on both of these tabs in the following sections. Setting general properties with the General tab. In the General tab of the Policy Properties dialog box, see Figure 4.4, you can change the policy name and description which appear in the IPsec snap-in. It's a good idea to use meaningful names for your policies so that you'll remember what each one is supposed to be doing. Use the check for policy changes every field to change the interval at which clients who use this policy will check for updates. The default value is 180 minutes is okay for most applications because you're unlikely to be changing the policies that frequently. 4.4, the General tab of the Policies Property dialog box. The Settings button allows you to, via the key exchange settings dialog box, change the key exchange settings used by this particular policy. See figure 4.5. You can use the controls in this dialog box to control how often the policy requires generation of new keys after either a certain amount of time, 8 hours by default, or a certain number of sessions. The master key perfect forward secrecy PFS option specifies whether or not you want to re-authenticate the SA for every session. Enabling this option provides a higher level of security than leaving it disabled, but performance could be adversely affected. The methods button displays a list of security methods that will be used to protect the key exchange. The policy always tries the highest level security from the method list, such as 3DES, then drops down to less secure methods if the remote end can't handle them. Managing rules with the Rules tab. The Rules tab of the Policy Properties dialog box allows you to change the rules included with the IPsec policy. Take a look at figure 4.6 and you'll see what the rule set for the server request security policy looks like. Figure 4.5, the key exchange settings dialog box. Figure 4.6, the rules tab of the properties dialog box. Here are the most important things to recognize on this tab. There are 3 rules, each of which ties a filter list to a filter action and authentication method. A single policy can contain an unlimited number of rules. It's common to have a number of rules that are applied in different situations. It's also common to have many different policies defined in a single Active Directory domain or local policy store. Each rule has a checkbox next to it that controls whether or not the rule is actually active. You can use these checkboxes to turn on or off individual rules within a policy. The add, edit, and remove buttons let you manipulate the list of rules. Note that rules aren't evaluated in any particular order, so there's no need to reorder them. The use add wizard checkbox controls whether or not the security rule wizard is used to add a new rule. By default, this box is checked. When it's unchecked, you can click the add button. The edit rule properties dialog box appears, enabling you to set up things by hand. When you select a rule and click the edit button, or when you create a new rule and the use wizard checkbox is cleared, the edit rule properties dialog box appears. There is one associated with each rule. There are 5 different tabs in the edit rule properties dialog box. The create new IP security wizard fills out the tabs for you based on the selections you make, but you should know which settings dialog box with each rule so you can fill out the tabs by hand. Therefore, instead of taking you through each step of the wizard, we'll go over each tab settings. The IP filter list tab. The IP filter list tab, see figure 4.7, shows which filter lists are associated with this rule. The filter list defined on your server will appear in the IP filter lists list. You can choose any one of them to be applied as a rule. As a result of this rule, if you like, you can add or remove filter lists here on it in the Manage IP Filter Lists and Add Filter Actions dialog box covered in the next section. So figure 4.7, the IP Filter List tab of the Edit Rule Properties dialog box, the Filter Action tab. The Filter Action tab, see figure 4.8, shows all of the filter actions defined in the policy. You can apply any filter action to the rule. Remember that you combine one filter list with one filter action to make a single rule, but you can group any number of rules into one policy. You can use the add, edit, and remove buttons to add, edit, and remove the filter action. The use Add Wizard checkbox controls whether adding a new filter action starts up the IP security filter action wizard, which you'll get into in the next section, or opens the properties dialog box. So figure 4.8, the filter action tab on the edit rule properties dialog box. The authentication method tab. The authentication method tab allows you to define one or more authentication methods that you want a particular rule to use. You can have multiple methods listed. If so, IPsec will attempt to use them in order of their appearance in the list. You have the same three choices mentioned earlier: Kerberos, certificates, or pre-shared keys. Figure 4.9, the authentication methods tab of the edit rule properties dialog box. The tunnel setting tab. On the tunnel setting tab, you can specify that this rule forms an IPsec tunnel with another system or tunnel endpoint. You'll read more about it in the section configuring IPsec for tunnel mode later in this chapter. The connection type tab. Use the connection type tab to specify what kind of connections this IPsec rule applies to. For example, you might want to specify different rules for dial-up and LAN connections depending on who your users are, whether they're connecting from, or what they do while connected. Your basic choice is simple. There are three radio buttons that you use to select which type of connections this rule applies to. The All Network Connections button is selected by default, so when you create a new rule, it will apply to both LAN and remote access connections. If you want the rule to cover only LAN or RAS connections, just select the corresponding radio button. Figure 4.10, the connections type tab of the edit rule properties dialog box. Managing filter lists and actions. Although you can manage IP filter lists and filter actions from the edit rule properties dialog box, it makes more sense to use the management tools provided in the snap-in. This is because the filter lists and actions are stored with the policy, not inside individual rules. The filter lists and actions you create in one policy scope, say the default domain policy, are available to all policies within that scope. You can manage filter lists and filter actions using the corresponding tabs in the edit rule properties dialog box, but that obscures the fact that these items are available to any policy. Instead, you use the manage IP filter lists and filter actions command from the pop-up menu. Right-click the IP security policies item or anywhere in the right-hand pane of the IPsec snap-in. This command displays the Manage IP Filter List and Filter Actions dialog box, which has two tabs. Most of the items on these tabs are self-explanatory because they closely resemble the controls you've already seen. In particular, the function of the Add, Edit, and Remove buttons, as well as use the Add Wizard checkbox, should be evident by this point. Instead of rehashing the controls, let's take a look at the process of defining a new filter list and the action to go with it. Adding IP filter lists and individual filters. There are two default IP filters set when you install Windows Server 2003, one for all IP traffic and one for all Internet Control Message Protocol ICMP traffic. Let's say that you're a little more selective, though. Perhaps you want to create an IPsec policy to secure web traffic between your company and its law firm. You'd first have to open the Manage IP Filter Lists and Filter Actions dialog box, at which point you'd see the Manage IP Filter List tab as shown in figure 4.11. 4.11, the Manage IP Filter Lists tab. Because filters lists aren't used in order, there's no need to reorder items in this list, though you can add, edit, and remove them when you edit or add a filter list, you'll see the IP filter list dialog box, see figure 412. The dialog box allows you to name and describe the filter list and then add, remove, or edit the individual filters that make up the list. When you edit or add an individual filter, there are 3 categories of information you need to know: the source and destination address you want the filter to use. These can be single IP addresses, single DNS names at any level. So the hawk.chalice.net, chalice.net, and .net are all valid or IP subnet. There are also special my and any addresses, e.g. my IP address, any IP address that you can use to indicate the source and destination. Figure 4.12, the IP filter list dialog box. Whether you want the filter to be mirrored. A mirrored filter automatically filters its opposite. If you set up filter from your IP address to remote address and configure it to allow only port 80 with mirroring, you'll also get a filter that allows traffic from the remote end back to you on port 80. The protocols and ports to which you want the filter to apply. You can choose any protocol type, including TCP, UDP, ICMP, EGP, RDP, and RAW, and you can either select individual source and destination ports or use the from any port and to any port radio buttons we will discuss later. You use the IP filters properties dialog box to get this information into the filter. When you use the add or edit buttons in the IP filter list dialog box, you'll see the properties dialog box for the appropriate filter, the new one or whichever one you'd selected before clicking the edit button. The dialog box has 3 tabs: description, address, and protocol. The description tab is used to name and describe the filter. We'll look at each of the other 2 tabs in the following section. So the address tab. The address tab is where you specify the source and destination address you want this filter to match. For the source address, you can choose to use the IP address assigned to the IPsec server, my IP address, any IP address, a specific DNS domain name or IP address, or a specific IP subnet. Likewise, for the destination address, you can choose the IPsec computer's address or any IP address or a specified DNS name, subnet, or IP address. You use these in combination to specify how you want the filter to trigger. For example, you could create a rule that says match any traffic from my address to IP address A, B, C, D. You could also create a rule that does what the all IP traffic filter does: matches any traffic from your IP address or any port to any destination. You could also use the mirrored checkbox to specify a reciprocal rule. For example, the mirrored rule of the all IP traffic rule matches traffic coming from any IP address on any port back to your IP address. Mirroring makes it easy to set up filters that cover both inbound and outbound traffic. Figure 4.13, the addressing tab of the IP filters properties dialog box. The protocol tab. The protocol tab lets you match traffic coming from or sent to a particular port using a specified protocol. This is useful because UDP source port 80 and TCP destination port 80 are entirely different. You use the select a protocol type pull down menu and the set the IP protocol port control group to specify the protocols and ports you want this filter to match. So adding a new filter action. The Manage Filter Action tab shows you which filter actions are defined in the current group of IPsec policies. You can add, edit, or remove filter actions to meet your needs. As part of Windows Server 2003, you get 3 filter actions: permit, request security, option, and require security. That will more than likely meet most of your needs, but it's still a good idea to know how to create policies yourself instead of depending on Microsoft to do it for you. Figure 4.15, the Manage Filters Action tab. You can use the Add button to add new filter actions that can be used in any policy you define. The Use Add Wizard checkbox is normally checked, so by default, you'll get the IP security filter action wizard. However, let's go through the properties pages associated with a filter action so you can see what's in one. When you click the Add button with the Use Add Wizard checkbox off, the first thing you see is the Security Methods tab of the new Filter Action Properties dialog box. You use this tab to select which methods you want this filter action to use in lieu of the permit and block methods. You can select the Negotiate Security Radio button to build your own custom security methods, choosing whatever AH and ESP algorithm meet your needs. The 3 checkboxes under the security methods list controls what this IPsec computer will do when confronted with a connection request from a machine that doesn't speak IPsec. The options include the following: the accept unsecured communication, but always respond using IPsec checkbox configures this action so that incoming connection requests will always be answered with an IPsec negotiation method. If the other end cannot use IPsec, the computer is allowed to accept the incoming request without any security in place. So figure 4.16, the Security Methods tab of the new Filter Action Properties dialog box. The Allow Unsecured Communications with Non-IPsec Aware Computers checkbox configures the action to allow any computer IPsec capable or not to communicate. Any machine that can't handle IPsec will get a normal insecure connection. By default, this box isn't checked. If you check it, you must be certain that your IPsec policies are set up properly. If they're not, some computers that you think are using IPsec policies may connect without security. The Use Session Key Perfect Forward Secrecy PFS determines whether your existing master keying material can be used to derive a new session key. When session key PFS is enabled, a new Diffie-Hellman key exchange is performed to generate new master key material before the new session key is created. Session key PFS does not require main mode reauthentication and uses less resources than master key PFS. So I won't leave it here today for this live stream. If you like listening, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you.